I tried beating Terraria using the Spear Overhaul mod. This mod adds a bunch of brand new spears into the game with various unique abilities that completely change the way you play Terraria. Will I be able to craft the Godslayer Spear and defeat Moonlord? Well, let's find out. I started off by spawning into the world, opening up my treasure bag, and starting to chop down trees. I got myself a ton of wood, made myself a workbench, and then went to go check the various different crafting recipes. There was a plethora of brand new spears within the game, and upon coming back to my workbench, I crafted myself the very first spear called the wooden pike. After this, I went over to the left side of the world and also realized that you can actually throw spears. So within this overhaul, every single spear has the ability to actually deal melee damage, and then you could throw it to deal additional range damage. I picked up myself some ice just so we can have enough resources to craft ourselves an ice spear once we come back to spawn, and upon making it all the way over to the left side of the world, I ended up dying to a crab. Once I came back to spawn, I crafted myself a cactus spear, which was a little bit better than our previous wooden spear, and then I ventured down into the jungle to pick up myself a bunch of resources. I got myself things such as iron, and before I can get anything good, I ended up dying to a jungle spike. Once I came back to spawn, I started digging myself out a elevator, picked up myself some stone, made myself a furnace back at spawn, crafted some iron, and then made myself the frozen halberd. This was an ice spear that inflicted frostburn upon any enemy that it landed on. I built myself a bunch of NPC prisons, I mean houses of course, and then continued digging out my elevator. I managed to find myself a couple of underground houses, which gave us some accessories, gave us a little bit more resources. I picked up more ores underground such as iron because that was going to come in handy for crafting loads of spears later in the game, and upon coming back to spawn, I made myself a cactus pickaxe just so we could dig a little bit faster, and then later I ventured back into the jungle. Within the jungle, I got myself more resources by opening up a bunch of chests. I got myself a couple of life crystals, but before I could make any meaningful progress, I ended up getting overwhelmed by mobs, so I teleported back to spawn. I made a bunch of chests back at spawn in order to organize all of my gear, and then ventured back into the jungle. Upon getting myself a bunch of resources, I managed to craft myself this one jungle poison spear that actually inflicted poison upon striking enemies, and thus far it was definitely the most powerful spear in our arsenal. I went over to defeat some Eater of Souls just so I can get myself some leather, and then I went to explode some of the demon orbs within the corruption so we can get the meteorite to spawn in. Once I came back to spawn, I crafted myself a couple of spearheads, crafted myself a bunch of spear class accessories, and then crafted myself a full set of tribal armor. This gave us a hefty amount of defense, increased our spear knockback, and made our melee projectiles leave a trail of poisonous gas. With our newfound power, I ventured over to the corruption and summoned in the Eater of Worlds. Of course, we took him out without a problem whatsoever, and then as I came back to spawn, I crafted myself a nightmare pickaxe. Along with this, using another spearhead, I made myself a Demon Slayer Tallgate, which was a spear made out of demonite bars, and after this, I built myself an arena, so as it turned to night, I could spawn in and fight the Eye of Cthulhu. Of course, using that one new demonite spear, we absolutely demolished the Eye, and later moved on to Skeletron's dungeon, summoned in Skeletron, took out both of his hands, and then took out his head with no trouble at all. I went into his dungeon to pick up a bunch of water candles and open up a couple of chests, just so we can get ourselves a shadow key, as we're going to need to get the dark lance for later crafting recipes. Once I came back to spawn, I decided to go down my elevator even further until I discovered a mushroom biome. Within this glowing mushroom biome, I picked up a couple of resources, but I continued digging further down because I was trying to reach the underworld. I managed to die countless times while trying to pick up obsidian, but as I made my way down to the underworld, I picked up some hellstone, and upon getting enough hellstone, I came back to spawn, made a plethora of hellstone bars, and crafted myself a full set of Hell Knight armor. This was crafted out of hellstone bars and silk, and then along with this, I crafted myself a hellstone spear called the Hell Knight Thruster. This was extremely overpowered, and we could actually combine it with the Dark Lance to make it even more powerful within hard mode. After this, I decided to go back to Skeletron's dungeon in order to get myself a shadow key for the Dark Lance that I was previously talking about, and using the Victory, which was a brand new spear that I actually crafted out of gold, and the Hell Knight Thruster, we absolutely demolished every single mob within the dungeon, got ourselves a decent amount of golden keys, and then I finally found myself that shadow key. Once I came back to spawn, we actually got invaded by goblins, so we took out the goblin invasion, and then I went straight over to the underworld, opened up myself a bunch of shadow chests until I got the Dark Lance, and then continued building my arena for the Wall of Flesh. Once my arena was fully prepared, I actually went back into the jungle in order to try and farm out for more life crystals. I did the casual old Boio way of having a Spelunker potion and then just digging out everything that got in my way. By the end of this, I managed to get myself 400 HP, and as I went down to the underworld, I used a Guide Voodoo Demon, chucked it into the lava, and summoned in the Wall of Flesh. As it was moving across the world from the left side, we absolutely demolished it with the Hell Knight Thruster and the Dark Lance, and anytime I took too much damage, I could just back up away and then start charging the Wall of Flesh by throwing my spears at it. Using this tactic, we absolutely brutalized the Wall of Flesh, putting us into hard mode. The first thing I did upon getting into hard mode was break all the demon altars and then bless our world with cobalt, orichalcum, and titanium. Once that was finished, I made myself a cobalt pickaxe, made myself a mithril anvil and a mithril pickaxe, and then lastly, I actually did not make myself a titanium pickaxe, nor did I make myself titanium armor, but instead I gathered a bunch of titanium, turned it into adamantite bars, and then once I came back to spawn, using crystal shards, souls of light, and adamantite, I crafted myself a full set of crystallized armor, which gave us an absolutely ridiculous amount of defense compared to what we previously had, and it gave us a brand new, absolutely wonderful set bonus. Every time we threw our spear at enemies, there would be crystals that would come out and explode on impact, dealing extra damage to mobs absolutely passively. After this, I went to go defeat the Wall of Flesh again in order to get myself some emblems, and then after this, I crafted myself the summons for all 3 mechanical bosses. I went to go defeat some wyverns so we could get ourselves souls of flight and craft ourselves a set of harpy wings, and once I had harpy wings, I summoned in the destroyer, and then using the Dark Flame Lance, which was actually a combination of the Hellfire Spear and the Dark Lance, we absolutely demolished the destroyer. It was honestly quite easy because there were so many various projectiles that our spears were shooting, and if we ever got in a sticky situation, we could just back up away from the destroyer and chuck the spears at it. Once we got souls of might and some hallowed bars, we could actually craft a brand new spear. This was called Midas's Spear, and every single time we thrusted it, it actually shot out these ichor projectiles that lowered the enemy's defense, and if we ever got in trouble and low on health, we could back up and then spam it by throwing it at the enemies. We summoned in, took out the twins, and then next we also took out Skeletron Prime. The jungle now grows restless. You know what else grows restless, boyos? That is right. The amount of times I use the same joke in every single video to tell you to subscribe. So if you want me to come up with something different, consider subscribing to the channel, but let's get on with the video. After defeating Skeletron Prime, I actually had all the various different souls to craft ourselves a very powerful spear. Using the Hell Knight Thruster, which was another one that I actually crafted, and the Ice Spear, we could actually craft a brand new spear called the Elemental Thrasher. This was a 2-element spear that consisted of ice and fire and represented a very perfect polarity between them. It was extremely powerful and it had the best of both worlds. After this, I crafted myself the Pickaxe Axe and then went into the jungle to try and find Plantera's bulb. There wasn't really much upgrading we could do before we actually defeated Plantera. As I located Plantera's bulb, I built myself a tiny arena around the bulb. We didn't really need much because the spear was very powerful and I was fairly confident that we would take her out very quickly. I ended up being right, as almost as soon as I spawned her in, we actually dealt a crazy amount of damage using the Elemental Thrasher and took her out like it was no problem. After this, I came back to spawn, went over to the jungle, and then using the Elemental Thrasher, I went to go farm out ectoplasm. This was a massive pain and we ended up dying countless times, and after I got myself enough ectoplasm, I went to go get some chlorophyte, and then once I came back to spawn, I crafted myself a bunch of Spectre bars. Using the Spectre bars, we could actually start crafting Godslayer Gear. This is the best equipment type within the Spear Overhaul, and the very first thing I crafted was the Godslayer Spear. This required us to combine 3 different spears, 10 Spectre bars, and 15 souls of light. I crafted the spear, and we were now ready to move on to crafting the Godslayer armor. This required a full set of the crystallized armor, and then a bunch of Spectre bars, so we needed to get more ectoplasm. I got myself more ectoplasm, but apparently before we could craft the armor, we needed an ancient manipulator, so I went over to Golem's temple, fought and defeated Golem, and then after this, I went to go fight the lunatic cultist. Using the Godslayer spear, it took us quite a while to actually take out the lunatic cultist, and I do admit it was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be, but after we took him out, we got ourselves the ancient manipulator and crafted ourselves a full set of Godslayer armor. This provided us with a set bonus of Titan's Blessing whenever we got hit. Essentially, all this does is grant the player 15% more melee damage and 30 defense. Our life regeneration is increased like crazy, and we have more invincibility time after being hit by enemies. With our brand new Godslayer armor, I went over to challenge the Stardust pillar first, and we took it out very quickly. We took out the Nebula pillar next. I bought myself a bunch of various different potions, built myself an arena for Moonlord. I went to go take out the Vortex pillar, and then with the Solar pillar last, we managed to take it out, and as I rushed back to spawn, my screen started shaking. I did get a little bit scared because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know whether the spear was going to be good against taking out Moonlord, but I had to try my best. As soon as Moonlord spawned in, I buffed up and I started spamming both of his hands. To my surprise, this spear did an absolutely crazy amount of damage, and we took out his hands in no time flat. Once his hands were out, I focused on his eyeball and we took that out as well, leaving us with only his core. I spammed his core with the Godslayer spear until we absolutely demolished Moonlord and beat Moonlord using only spears. Be sure to check out another video like this on screen. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're new. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. This has been Boio. Peace out.